Hello everyone and welcome to a quick run through of the next mission in the Artemis program, Artemis III. This is going to be the Blue Origin version of that. There's also potentially a SpaceX version, and if somebody else comes up with a lunar lander, there could be a third version. But for now we only know of two versions, and so this is the one that includes the Blue Origin lander, which is the Blue Moon Mark II, being launched on the New Glenn rocket from Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral. So there it goes. The first stage is recoverable. It lands on a drone ship, and in this launch it will reserve that fuel to do that. That's easy because the lander in this case is underfueled. It's only got about 10% of its total fuel load. As I understand it, the Blue Moon Mark II cannot launch fully fueled because the tanks are meant for the moon and they're not meant for the launch loads around Earth, and so they can't have especially the very heavy oxygen load sloshing in them, but even the hydrogen load would probably be too much. But they have to have some fuel in, otherwise it can't control itself for docking. So I've assumed about 10%, which is more than enough for low Earth orbit. And there goes the first stage. At that load, it would be about 20 tons, which is very light compared to the full capability of the New Glenn rocket. Even the New Glenn with the 2-engine upper stage, they are planning a 4-engine upper stage one. And this version is meant to carry 45 tons to low Earth orbit while reusing the first stage. This is only 20 tons, so in fact it could push it nearly to the moon, not quite. So it's got plenty of extra to work with there. So no problems depositing this into a fairly high orbit around, well, not a high orbit, still low Earth orbit, but high up, so that's easier to rendezvous with. And then we launch the Orion spacecraft on the SLS. In this case, I've omitted the ICPS stage. So this is core alone SLS, well, core plus boosters, but there is no functioning second stage. However, we did need to put a spacer there or a dummy stage because otherwise the crew module will not line up with the crew access arm. So there has to be something there, and so we've just put sort of a dummy stage there. It's still going to be cheaper than putting a thing with an engine. The RL-10 engine costs a lot of money, and that's more than enough to get the Orion spacecraft to low Earth orbit. The SLS without any other upper stage can carry 90 tons to low Earth orbit almost certainly, and the Orion is 30-ish tons, so again, it could probably do a lot to push it very high up if it needed to, but we don't need that. So the goal here is for the Orion spacecraft to dock to the lander and then test out the lander before they try to head to the moon with it, and then they'll make sure that the astronauts are comfortable with the lander so that it's not going to be the first time they're seeing it when they go to the moon. They can give some practical feedback and, test systems like, like the toilet or something. I don't know if the lander is going to have a toilet also, but you never know. There's something that's going to need practical testing like that. As we're not quite in orbit here. We're just shy of orbit. The Orion spacecraft will finish up orbit so that the core can deorbit. So the core is just going to drift down into the atmosphere and get disposed of. The Orion spacecraft is going to do a burn with its service module engine in order to fully make orbit. But first I wanted to get some shots of it floating around the core there. Of course, all of this is being done in Kerbal Space Program. I should have mentioned. This is all being done in Kerbal Space Program with RSS Reborn, and the spacecraft and the rocket are from Artemis Construction Kits, so these are both mods, and this is all real solar system. It's all being done physically, it's not an animation. It is being calculated, and I actually have to do the burns legitimately. So that was the burn to make orbit. And then we have to do the rendezvous burns to catch up to our lander in orbit. So there's an odd rendezvous burn, a radial burn in this case. But that's how orbital dynamics work sometimes. This is a inclination correction burn. And then we're finally in sight of the lander. You can see the little speck of the lander over there, sort of going at the same speed as us. We have to close into that. And eventually I close in as we're going over into the nighttime side, so I do delay docking. I actually docked on the wrong docking port the first time, if I have to be honest. So the top of the lander has a propellant-only docking port. There's no way to get from the top of the lander into the crew cabin. The docking port that the Orion spacecraft would need to dock to is directly on the crew cabin at the bottom of the vehicle. This does mean that the lander cannot be used to transfer Orion over to the moon, even though the lander is fairly big and very efficient. I've seen people trying to propose that the lander should push Orion over there and that would be simpler, so they rendezvous in low Earth orbit and then go to the moon together. That's not how it's going to happen, and one reason is the docking ports can't take the kind of force involved, and the second thing is the docking port's just not even in the right place, and if Orion tried to dock to the one at the top, it can't. That's not the right kind of docking port. They need a docking port that can refuel the blue moon up there, and so that'll have fuel tubes, not people tubes, basically. So here we are docking at the right location, and so my expectation is the plan is that they're going to send the lander over to the moon, and Orion will meet up with the lander at the moon, not in Earth orbit. This Earth orbit mission does parallel one of the Apollo missions. This was Apollo 9, where they tested out the lander, though in that situation, the Saturn V launched both the crew module and the lander at the same time, and they just sort of turned around with the crew module and docked to the lander directly. It wasn't two separate launches. In this case, it's going to be two separate launches. And one thing that they're going to do on this mission potentially is to test out their new spacesuits, their EVA suits. They're not going to have a jetpack like the Kerbal does, but they will be on some sort of umbilical, and then they can test out the EVA suits potentially. Potentially, I'm not sure. And those suits will be from Axiom. So here the Kerbal is taking a look at things. I just thought that would be fun to do. And then coming back around and getting into the Orion spacecraft. So, I mean, there's multiple options for getting the Blue Moon lander over to the moon. You can refuel it in low Earth orbit and have it do the transfer, but actually, with the New Glenn 9x4, the bigger version of the rocket, if you underfuel the lander, the Blue Moon Mark II lander, to 10% as we've done here, it is quite possible for the rocket to directly transfer to the moon and then have it capture around the moon using its own little bit of fuel, the 10%, and then have the refuelers go over to the moon. So that's another way of doing it. You're eventually going to have to refuel it around the moon anyway, whether you do some refueling around the Earth. So either way, you're going to have to do that part. But you could do more refueling around Earth and then send less fuel over to it once it's around the moon. But then it has to, well, I mean, it's about as efficient as anything that can transfer the fuel over there can get, unless it's going to be using ion engines, which actually Blue Origin is developing. So they have their Blue Ring, is it, or something like that, that uses ions, so maybe they could use that, I don't know. Anyway, the pod is coming down, but not in the right place. I tried to get to the Pacific Ocean, but I overshot a bit and ended up over Mexico. So a little faux pas on my part. I didn't know how far it would go, and maybe I should have tried to do more of a lifting entry. I didn't. I didn't use the descent mode, and in that case I could have gotten it to the Gulf, but yeah, this is fine. It's fine for the purposes of just demonstrating the basic outline of the Artemis III mission. We're okay. They're just gonna lose some teeth when they hit the ground. But they're Kerbals. Do they have teeth? They do have teeth, I think. But anyway, they're probably more resilient with their teeth than we are. So it'll be alright. So there it is, Artemis III. With that, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. And I'll see you next time.